Welcome to the Run for God Run Club, where you will find God in a runner's space.
Welcome to the Run for God Run Club. This is your one stop each week to be motivated and inspired to get off the couch and onto the running trail, where you can in turn inspire others to do the same. Let's learn, laugh, and leap into running together, giving God the glory for what we're able to do in His name. Amen. I am your running host, Dean Thompson. Once again, I'm joined by Run for God founder Mitchell Hollis. Last week, we showed part one of the Dean Karnazes interview. This week, we're going to show part two. What'd you think about that?
I think he's fascinating,
Yes.
and I can't wait for you to be able to talk to him this Thursday night.
Absolutely.
He's going to be on a Facebook Live for everybody tuning in, and you can ask your questions there. I'm sure the questions I ask have spurred on a whole nother set of questions that I'm sure you're going to ask. And but yeah, he's just a fascinating guy. I love talking to people who have done things that we all think are impossible.
Yeah.
And running from LA to New York, I think is impossible. But it's not, because Dean did it.
That's right.
And so, yeah, it was a fascinating interview. And Dean, if you're out there listening, thank you for taking the time. You didn't have to do this. He did not have to come on and do this with us, but it just shows you the personality or the personability of the people in our sport. They're just, it's not all about them.
Yep.
And he constantly points to others who helped him not only along in this sport, but the people who make this sport possible and helping to foster this sport and be an ambassador. We talked about that last week.
Absolutely.
So thank you, Dean.
And listen, if you're out there listening and you have a particular question that you would like for me to ask Dean, email me at dean@runforgod.com, and we'll try to get that question asked.
Yeah.
There's something just burning a hole that you just got to hear it.
And I'm
let me
sure
know what that
everybody
is.
listening has that question.
Absolutely. Surely. We talked last week about the BADWATER 135, running through Death Valley and up to Mount Whitney. We talked about the Disney to New York thing that you just referenced and doing that live with Regis and Kathy Lee. We talked about the road to Sparta and how fascinating that is. And if you don't have that book, go ahead and get that ordered, because it's an interesting book. And there's so much more to that story of Phidippides than we ever knew before. And think about this, a runner from 2,500 years ago still has an impact on the world today. So what can we all do with our running? If a guy can have an impact on the world 2,500 years later, he changed history. And that's interesting to know that a runner did that. So if you haven't seen that, go back and watch that, and we'll check out the second part of Dean's video right here. First, let us get a word from our sponsor, J Radio, and then we'll go on to part two of Dean Karnazes.
As a Christian runner, you might find it hard to decide what to listen to while you run. If you're looking for positive and Christian music that will help you keep your pace, check out the Radioactive station on the new J Radio. We'll take care of picking the music so that you can concentrate on your run. Plus, you can count on us to make sure that the music is uplifting and encouraging. Check out jradio.com or download the app in your app store.
What has been your favorite project? Because you've worked on so many incredible projects. What would be your favorite?
Wow. In so many ways, running 50 marathons in 50 states in 50 days was, the pinnacle of my, projects, if you will, just because the logistics and planning was so intense. It went well beyond just the running. So just, being able to put together the logistics was daunting. And then to try to line up the sponsors was daunting as well, because, the sponsors all said yes right out of the gate. We had to fund this thing somehow. And so I approached sponsors, and every sponsor that I approached said, yes, I want to sponsor it. So now we had all these sponsors, and I was kind of on the hook, like, okay, well, now I've got all this sponsorship money. Suppose I die, like after Yeah, after 2 marathons, suppose I can't get out of bed the next day.
Yeah.
So the pressure kind of mounted in that regard. But it ended up being an amazing adventure. I took my family along, which, I had 2 young kids at the time. And my mom was a retired public school teacher. So she homeschooled the kids. They say that she road schooled them. So they were in a school bus, getting lessons every morning, and then enjoying, a different state every day and meeting different kids. We'd stop at schools along the way and they'd meet different kids. We tried all kinds of different food. It was more than just running, well more than just running. And I hope I captured it in the book, that it was more of a, just this once in a lifetime sort of journey with your family.
And you pretty much had people running with you on it, because people think you did an actual marathon every day, which you did the distance, but it wasn't organized races every day. Did you have people running with you every day though?
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting point. So 8 of the marathons were quote unquote live marathons. So I ran like the Chicago Marathon with 35,000 other people. I ran Marine Corps Marathon, on the day of the Marine Corps Marathon. The final marathon was the New York City Marathon, which I ran, with 50,000 other runners. But 42 of the races were recreated marathons. And when I say recreated, what we did is we contacted the race director for the most prominent marathon in that state and said, hey, on this date, when we show up, will you set up your official starting line? Will you let us follow your certified and sanctioned course and finish at your official finish line, so that we had a record of actually doing a marathon? We didn't want to just like GPS, we wanted to have an actual legit marathon that we ran. Like in Georgia, we ran the Atlanta Marathon on a random Thursday, and it was incredible. And we were able to obtain permits for up to 50 runners to join me at each marathon. So you could go on and register, just like any other marathon, to register and come run this kind of recreated marathon on a weekday, in some random city. And I thought, wow, no one's going to ever sign up for this. Well, after about a week, we had hundreds of people signing up for each. So we had waiting lists of people trying to come run these marathons. It was just such a great thing, on a random day of the week to go run a marathon. And, the entire marathon the course wasn't closed like during marathon day. Like for instance, Dallas, the Dallas Marathon goes on the freeway for part of the way. So they didn't just close the freeway for 5 or 6 hours. We had this roaming police escort that would kind of close down intersections as we crossed through. So we had to stick together as a pod of people, which made it even more fun because, we were all like a group and we all supported each other. I mean, some of the faster runners had to slow down a bit to accommodate the slower runners, and some of the slower runners had to speed up so that we all stuck together so that we could get through certain intersections and get on the freeway on-ramps and off of freeway on-ramps. So it was really, an amazing undertaking.
Yeah, I would think logistically that whoever handled your logistics there must have been a genius, because I couldn't. We put on a race here locally, and it's a nightmare to put on one race. And imagine doing 50 in 50 days. So that's incredible. Hats off to your logistics person there.
Well, it was the same team that coordinates the Olympic torch run across the U.S. So they were kind of trained logistic experts.
Okay.
Yeah, they knew what they were doing, but it still tested them.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I want to go to a little segment that I like to do with people that I talk to, and I call it my lightning round, and it's just a series of short questions, and I just want to get your reaction to them. I've read many times and I've heard many times that you don't own a car. Why is that?
Well, I was sponsored by Volkswagen, but I was never using the car, and I felt like it was disingenuous to keep the sponsorship going. So I gave them back the car, and that was like 10 years ago. And I thought, I just haven't gotten around to buying a car. And all of a sudden, I didn't really need a car. I mean, I just found myself running everywhere. It was a great way to kind of multitask, I guess. I have different size backpacks that I put on depending on, if I need to go to the bank or if I need to go grocery shopping. So I just basically run everywhere. And, when I have meetings in San Francisco, which is about 15 miles from my house, I typically leave 2.5 hours early. So I just need to plan my day a little bit better, but I'll run in, have a meeting, and then turn around and run home. It was my way of, we all talk about our commitment to the environment, and, I'm trying to do everything I can. And this was just a very visible way of honoring that commitment. It's just, I'm not going to drive. Why drive? And it's easier now, I've got to admit, with, Uber and Lyft.
Yeah.
But back in the day, there was no option like that. So I was really forced to run everywhere. Wow.
That's incredible. So are you still competing?
I was. I had a pretty active race calendar this year.
Yeah.
And now I have not a single race this year. So it's amazing how quickly I ran the Napa Valley Marathon the 1st of March, and then everything shut down, as you know. So I will be competing when competition comes back online.
Right, and hopefully that'll be soon. I told my wife that.
Yeah, as a race director, I'm sure.
I'm just ready to go to a restaurant. I've learned to cook a lot, but I'm ready to go out to eat. How about new projects? Do you have any new projects or books or things that are on the horizon?
Yeah, so I'm working on my 6th book, actually. So I'm finishing another book right now. I'm also writing the screenplay for my first book, Ultramarathon Man, which is going to be made into a movie. So motion picture rights to the book were auctioned off, and I'm helping the writer actually write the movie script. So that's really exciting to me, because it's kind of something new and different that I'm getting to explore. Like I said, I had a lot of travel plans this year.
Yeah.
I was planning on doing, some marathons in almost every country of the world. And that, obviously is now dependent on God, right? I don't know when that's going to open back up. I mean, to your point, getting to a local restaurant is one thing, getting on a plane and flying internationally is a whole nother level.
Yeah. Yeah. So I haven't heard about the screenplay. So who do you envision playing the role of Dean Karnazes?
I don't, they've asked me, do I want to play a role? And I think I'd like to play one of my cross country coaches.
Yeah.
Because I'm obviously not, when the story was written, I was a much younger man, but I don't know, like there's a number of actors that have been approached, and a few of them have said they're very interested. And I'm really not supposed to say their names.
Yeah.
But they read the book, and there are a lot of the younger male athletes. I mean, actors are athletes. They're very fit. And, the one stipulation I put in the contract in signing off on the motion picture rights was that everyone who's attached to this film, whether it be, an extra or, a producer, or especially the main actors and actresses, they have to be a runner. Because I said, for it to be an authentic movie, it'd be really easy for Hollywood to do a really dumb running movie,
Yeah.
Because I'm a surfer as well. And like every surfing movie that comes out, if you're a real surfer, you look at it and you go, that's so Hollywood.
Yeah.
And I thought the only way one way to ensure that doesn't happen is to make sure everyone on set is a runner, because we can relate to each other, right? We've all struggled. We've all suffered. We know what it's like to overcome adversity. And I think that just gives you a different color on life.
Right. You made a comment in an interview that I watched. You call yourself an opportunistic trainer, and I found that term very intriguing. Explain to everybody what you mean by an opportunistic trainer.
Well, everything I do is viewed through the lens of being the best animal I can be. Mm-hmm. So that means training throughout the course of the day. Doing, if I've got 15 minutes, I'll do this HIIT routine I have, high intensity interval training that involves just body weight, push-ups, sit-ups, chair dips, and burpees. Lots of burpees. I know everyone loves burpees.
Everybody loves burpees.
Yeah. And, like when I'm writing my books and doing my email and everything, I'm always on my feet, bouncing around. Even today, I notice you're sitting down. Shame. I'm standing right now doing the interview.
I have actually looked at the Vera desk, the ones that come up. Those are pretty cool.
I highly encourage it. Whatever you can do. I mean, I did a little video. If you've got an ironing board, I know you're trapped at home, pull out an ironing board and that becomes your standing desk. So I encourage you to stand all day. I'm bouncing on my toes. So you're constantly moving, and that constant movement, if I've got an hour, if I've got 45 minutes, I'll go for a quick run. You don't have to go far as long as you go fast.
Right.
So any opportunity that presents, I'm trying to work out and be the best animal I can. And that's what I meant by being an opportunistic trainer.
Yeah. Yeah. And it makes sense because, I mean, obviously one of the biggest excuses we hear for not getting my run in or whatever is I just don't have time. And I always tell people you've got to schedule it, just like if it were a meeting and you put that in your calendar, well, schedule your run. But I also like your take where, if you have 20 minutes between meetings, go get a run in. And that's a great way to look at it. Just fit it in where you can. If you don't schedule it, then just find the time during the day. And because that's the biggest.
And I actually find it's quite an incentive when you've got that clock ticking. Like, okay, the meeting starts in half an hour. I got to go.
Right.
It gives you a finish line already. It somehow makes it more approachable.
Right. Right. Yeah, we were actually on the way home yesterday. My wife and I had been somewhere, and I had on cargo shorts and a T-shirt, and I knew I had to get home to do something, so I had her drop me off several miles from the house, and I just ran home. So all my neighbors are seeing me running down the road in cargo shorts, but it's something I had to do. So yeah, you're right. Get it in when you can. Going back to your 50/50 book, you had in your bio that that was written with Matt Fitzgerald, and I've read a book by Matt called How Bad Do You Want It? It's a great book that he wrote talking about the mental side of sport, and he used several different sports. But give us a little bit of insight on how much you feel that mental toughness plays into our sport, because I feel like it's a lot, and you read a lot of different perspectives on this, but I would love to hear your perspective.
I think mental toughness is more than physical toughness. There's a saying, there's a race I do called the Western States 100-mile endurance run.
Right.
And there's a famous saying there that you run the first 50 miles with your legs and the next 50 miles with your mind.
Right.
So, when I stand on the starting line of an ultra marathon, you look around the crowd and, some of the people don't look to be the fittest on earth. I mean, you look at some of the people and you're like, wow, they don't look all that fit. They're tough and they're stubborn and they will not stop. And I think those qualities are more important than physical fitness, especially when you move to further and further distances.
Right. Right. So last question. We have, as part of Run for God, obviously the 5K challenge teaches people who have never run. It takes them to their first 5K, but then we have our coaches who are runners of all abilities, some seasoned and some who are actually working toward their first 5K. What would be, let's say, 3 pieces of advice that you would give people who are in the Run for God family, whether they're coaches or they're brand new to the sport? What would be 3 pieces of advice that you would give to the Run for God family?
Well, when I agreed to this interview, I was told there'd be no math. 3, I can't even count to 2 these days, let alone 3. But, I would say, first and foremost, try to live in the moment and try to be in the here and now, especially when things get difficult. When you're running your first 5K, there'll be a point where you'll just say, I don't know if I can make it. Like, this hurts so bad. And you'll be looking for the next mile marker or the next kilometer marker, thinking, when is this coming up? When is this coming up? Don't do that. Just say, I'm going to take my next step to the best of my ability, and then my next step to the best of my ability. So just be really in the moment, be present, and be now. That's hard to do. I mean, our minds are active, right? Even as you're listening to me, you're probably thinking about other things or you're reflecting on the past. Try not to do that. Just try to focus on your next step and your next step and your next step. So that's one approach. Second, I would say that misery loves cutlery. So if you're miserable, a lot of times put a gel pack in your mouth. Sometimes you're hungry, and just having something in your mouth, a little bit of sweetness can pep you up. And the other thing that I would say is invest in a good pair of shoes, because if you have good fitting shoes, it's really helpful all the way around.
Right.
That's just that's a practical point.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Dean, it has been, you gave me 45 minutes. It's been 43 minutes. So we hit our goal, but I just want to say from a personal note, thank you for the ambassador that you've been to the sport. I have followed you ever since I started running, and I hope that you will continue to do what you do, which is inspire people to get active. You've got me thinking right now that I need to go get my ironing board and
you need to be standing up.
But I want to thank you for your time and all that you've done and what you mean to a lot of our coaches. We have 4,500 coaches around the world, and many of them know exactly who you are. And I want to thank you for being an inspiration to everybody. And if you ever need us for anything, then feel free to reach out, and thank you for your time.
Well, I appreciate you having me on. I look forward to the day we can all share some footsteps together. That's going to be a glorious moment.
All right. Well, Dean, thank you. We'll cut it off right there. But thank you for your time.
You're a really good host. You did your homework. Total respect for you.
Well,
I do a lot of these, and you're a dream.
Really?
Thank you for preparing. Yeah, no, your voice is good. Everything you did your homework. You had your questions. You sent me the questions.
I've read all your books. I did my homework through the years.
Are you like a stalker? Like, security!
There is power in people's stories.
What I did need and what I was begging for was a relationship that I didn't know that I needed, and only God could give it to me.
I started hearing all these stories that just made me realize this was the right move. I'm here to give these people hope through what Christ can do in their life.
Your story can help encourage others around the country, just like these stories have. You can walk through a simple process of sharing your story with the Big Share app. Download the Big Share app in your app store to start sharing hope with others.
Okay, we're back. So let me ask this. Do you think we see him as more or less crazy based on talking to him one-on-one? What do you think?
Probably more, because it's like it's no big deal. I mean, I shouldn't say that. It's like, and I'm sure he's shared these stories so many times that he's got them down pat, but it's, I've run the BADWATER 135 10 times. It's because there's so many of these feats that he's accomplished that one just overshadows the other. And I was just thinking before we went to the interview, there's a race that he's done that some people in the ultramarathon world consider it the pinnacle of the sport. And we haven't even talked about it. And it's the Western States 100.
Yeah.
We talk about running through Death Valley. There's an ultramarathon that runs through the Colorado Rockies, the Rocky Mountains, where you're ascending and descending thousands and thousands of feet. And some people consider that to be one of the greatest ultramarathons of all time. And it's like that gets glanced over in his story. So that shows you the magnitude of the accomplishments that Dean has had.
Yeah. So many things that he's done. If you haven't read any of his books or you don't know about Dean, research him a little bit. He's an interesting guy in the things that he's done. And you mentioned last time, and one of the things you didn't talk about in the interview was how he would run and have the pizza guy meet him at a particular corner, eat a pizza, and then keep running. And I think that's a fascinating. It tells you a lot about his personality.
Could you imagine being the Domino's guy answering the phone? Sir, what would you like this delivered? Well, by the time you get here, I'll probably be at First Street and Elm Street or something like that. And the guy's got to be thinking, this is either a joke or this guy's really crazy. But yeah, he talks about in his book that he would run with his credit card. And if he needed to stop for a quick dinner or things like that, he had to. I'm sure now everybody knows because he does run everywhere. You know, we talk about that he doesn't even own a car, and we maybe get to that. But if he's got different size book bags, and if depending on what he's doing for the day, he lives just outside of San Francisco. I think he said 15 miles, and if he's got a meeting downtown, he just leaves 2.5 hours early. And
What?
because I start thinking about the logistics of, okay, he's going to be sweating when he gets there. If it's raining, he's going to be soaking wet. But he's just learned to adapt with all that. And I'm sure the people in the meetings, here comes Crazy Dean. I see him rolling in right now.
It makes me think about the excuses that we use to why we can't do things.
Exactly.
And then you think about the logistics of not having a car.
Right.
And think about what you have to do for that. Yeah, that's crazy. You start off this second half of the interview by asking him about his projects, and maybe what some of the most memorable projects are. And it seemed like he doesn't get asked that question a lot because he had to think about it for a minute. But then he comes up and he believes that this 50 marathons in 50 states in 50 days was probably one of the biggest undertakings that he'd ever done. Isn't that amazing to think about the logistics of everything that he had to do? Because you think about the idea of running 50 marathons in 50 days is tough enough. I mean, I think about the idea of just getting up, and let's just say we have a marathon course outside my door, and I just get up and I go outside and run 26.2 miles every day. Right. Okay, that's tough. Now you're thinking about, okay, now we're going to go to a different place every time. Oh, and it's going to be in a different state every time.
Right.
Oh, and I'm going to take my family with me.
Yeah.
And we're going to, what he called road school the kids.
Yeah, I like that.
Along the way. They're going to take time to stop at different schools and talk with different people and eat local food and all of those things. Think about how complicated that whole endeavor was.
Well, and not only that, but I didn't know this until he started talking about Atlanta, but he ran the courses of the largest marathon in each state. Mm-hmm. So that tells you he's in big cities for all of these. Think about the logistics of what it takes to put on the Atlanta Marathon or the New York City Marathon. He's doing that 50 days in a row, and a lot of times he's getting these permits for some people to run with him, but these aren't traffic-free places when he's running.
Oh, yeah.
So you've got the logistics of not only am I doing this 50 days in a row, not only am I dog-tired, not only am I doing all the press, but I'm having to worry about getting run over by cars. Yeah. I assumed, I knew about this, and I've read part of the 50-50-50, but I didn't realize it was the biggest marathons in each state, which is, I just thought they went out and picked 26.2 miles in rural Georgia or Tennessee or wherever they were. No. He took these certified courses and ran those. And I mean, think about running in downtown Atlanta at 2:00 in the afternoon. That's got to be a nightmare.
You know it.
It's not constant running because they didn't close these courses for him.
Yeah.
So you've got crosswalks and traffic and people in these cities who are blowing their horns at you. And
he's got 50 people in tow.
Exactly. So, and he said he actually used the people who did the torch relay, which that was a smart move on his part.
Boy, no kidding.
Yeah.
If there's anybody that can do it, those guys, I don't know who did that, but that's amazing. And he talked about having a coach. He talked about Matt Fitzgerald kind of helping him with that. And, of course, we know Matt Fitzgerald from several publications. He's written some really, really good books. And that he had a coaching background. And you think about a guy like Dean who just, decides one day to go out and run 30 miles one night when he's drunk in a bar and doing crazy stuff like that. And you think, well, a guy like that doesn't need a coach.
Right. Probably not disciplined to listen to a coach.
Yeah.
But I thought that was fascinating. Yeah, Matt Fitzgerald, we're big fans of his.
Yeah, absolutely. He's got several books that are really, really good. He said, 8 of them were actual races, and so there was probably some pretty good hoopla and fanfare around those particular races.
Yeah, and I do remember some of those. That was I'm sure that made it easier to do on his part.
Oh, had to be. Yeah. Just the energy you draw from the crowd around you. And I think he said he finished with the New York Marathon.
Yeah.
Which is, I've never run the New York Marathon, but I sure do want to, because it's an iconic race.
Yeah.
And certainly need to do that someday. And then the whole idea of these people showing up, and he talked about people show up on a random Thursday morning, and he didn't know that anybody would show up, and he had more people request to be able to run with him than he could actually fulfill. But I can see that. He can't see that maybe, but I can see that.
Yeah.
If I knew he was going to be in Dalton and I get a chance to run with him, I would be signed up.
Yeah. Even if we didn't get in, we'd probably we'd accidentally be running the same time as him and get into that group. But yeah, I mean, the vision of that, the picture of that I have in my mind, and we talked about this last week, is Forrest Gump. The longer Forrest Gump went, the more and the bigger crowd they got with him.
Yeah.
Then we all know the end of the story. He just stopped and turned around and went home. Dean hasn't stopped. But yeah, it's just a fascinating story.
Maybe one day that's how he'll stop.
Maybe that's how he'll end his career. Ryan Hall talked about leaving his shoes on the track.
Yeah.
Maybe Dean will grow his beard out and hair long and recreate that.
Pull a Forrest Gump. Yeah. Well, we already talked about him not owning a car, but not only did he not own a car, but he was sponsored by a car company and then returned the car.
They gave him a car.
They gave him one.
And he said it just felt disingenuous.
Yeah.
And kind of hypocritical on his part because I think in another interview I read where he owned it, and I think he drove it a handful of times, and it sat in the garage, and he thought, I don't need this, and he got rid of that sponsorship because it was just disingenuous. And yeah, and he doesn't live in downtown San Francisco like we talked. He lives about 15 miles outside of San Francisco. So, but he talks about he had different size backpacks depending on what he was going in town to do, whether he was going to the bank or get groceries. And
how do you get groceries? I'm trying to figure that one out. Is he can only get, if he lives that far away from a grocery store and he's going to get groceries, he's got to go 3 times a week to get groceries, because you can't fit that much in a backpack.
About a gallon of milk. I mean, I don't know if he drinks milk or not, but I mean, that's a lot of weight.
Well, he's got to have some liquid surely in there. So
and going to the bank. I mean, I'm sure everybody around that area is used to him now, but I remember when we were training for the treadmill marathon, the guy I was training with, we would start at my house, and the local Chick-fil-A from my house was about 15 miles away, and we would run to Chick-fil-A, go in, sit down and eat, and run back. And the looks that we got walking into Chick-fil-A completely drenched from head to toe. It's lunch hour, business people are coming in and getting their food. And here are these two guys that look like death warmed over. And, of course, I'm sure Dean doesn't. He probably looks a little more presentable because he's better at it than we were. We were dead tired by that point. And so, yeah, I just think about the people that see him that don't know who he is and think, who is this crazy guy?
Yeah. Can you imagine the people who they have no idea the accomplishments that guy has, and he just looks like you got to sometimes look almost like a bum coming in, off the road like that. So yeah. And you asked him about, is he still competing? And of course he said, well, he hopes to when it's time to get back to it.
Yeah, I think his schedule's been cleared so far this year, like all of ours.
Yeah. So hopefully we get back to that soon. And I thought about the competitions and the things that he's in. And here's one of the things we started off. Last week we talked a little bit about ultra running, and something that's different about ultra running than other distances is there are a fair number of ultra races where women make up a good portion of the top echelon of the fields, because it seems the longer we go, the more equal we are physically,
right?
Because women's bodies are built differently than men, and I think that's an interesting thing that there are some pretty sizable ultramarathons out there that are being won by women.
Right.
So I just think that's interesting. that performance gap that is fairly large in although the marathon's getting closer and closer.
Yeah.
It's down to what, a little over 10 minutes now.
Yeah.
At one time it was much larger than that. So, but women are finding they can do more and more and more and more, and more women are getting into ultra marathons and marathons. Women make up almost 40% of marathon fields now. At one time, I don't know if you've never seen the story of the first woman, Catherine Switzer, at the Boston Marathon. Mm-hmm. Very interesting story. I mean, it wasn't until the 80s that the Boston Marathon allowed women in at all. Mm-hmm. And now they're 40% of the people that are there.
Yeah, and you know, the Run for God family, many people don't know this, but the Run for God family is 60% female.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, hats off to them. I know there's a lot out there that can run way faster than I can.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And he talked about some new projects, and he talked about working on his 6th book. That's a good bit of writing to get in 6 books, but I'm interested in this new one that he's talking about. But he talked about writing this screenplay, and so they're going to do a movie on this 50 marathons in 50 states in 50 days thing, and I am fascinated to see that one.
Yeah. To see the behind the scenes and the logistics, that'll be as interesting as, I mean, the running is incredible, but the logistics behind that will be incredible to see how all that took place.
And you asked him who would play him in a movie.
Yeah.
And I of course, I understand why he can't say, because they've already been talking with some folks.
I was hoping he was going to say Tom Hanks.
Yeah. Well,
Forrest Gump.
That's it'll be interesting to see who they do choose. But he mentioned that he wanted all of the folks in the movie to be runners,
right?
Because he wants it to be
authentic.
And I think that's a neat idea to do that, because we've all seen running movies where the folks in it are clearly not runners.
That can't happen.
And I can't think of a running movie out there where at least a portion
is far-fetched.
Was clearly not a runner.
Right.
I think about I don't even want to get into the movies.
Yeah.
But there's a bunch of running movies out there, and nearly every one of them.
And I think it depends on the audience that the movie companies are going toward. You know, some of these
that's true.
They're kind of going for the blockbuster type. You know, it's all about the storyline and there's a angle to it.
Yeah.
But it's obvious that Dean wants this to be a purist.
Yeah.
He wants everything to be accurate. It's more from a documentary standpoint. I think he didn't really get into that, but from just the sound of wanting everybody to be runners, well, there's not a ton of great actors who are also great runners out there. So that's going to kind of narrow his field, but it lets me know that he's wanting this to be very accurate portrayal of the sport, which is hats off to him for that.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. He talked about being an opportunistic trainer.
I still haven't ordered my stand-up desk yet.
He called you out.
He did. I was like, wow, I need to stand up. I kind of started feeling inadequate sitting down, and he was obvious that he was standing because he was bouncing around. I don't know if you noticed it. If you went and watched the video, he could not stand still during this interview. And so, I need to go order me a Varidesk and start standing. But it was fascinating for him to talk about how we have these excuses. Mm-hmm. Everybody has excuses. You talked about that you were going to do a track workout the other night, and it was late before you got out, and you thought, I'm just going to go out and do an easy run. Well, that was an excuse because you didn't have a track, and you said that came to my mind, and so I took an opportunity, and I did my track workout on a road. And that's what he's saying is so many times we get hung up on schedules and structure of our day that we say there's not room for a workout, there's not room for training. And what he was saying is there's always room. He was training during that interview. He was standing up, moving around, and that's great. Maybe we should start doing this interview standing up. Maybe. He would be proud of us.
He would.
But making making the best of every little opportunity. Did I say this in the interview? I think when we were talking, it was just a couple of days earlier. I knew I was going to be getting home late, and there was a chance I wasn't going to get my run in. And so I got my wife to drop me off a few miles from the house on our way home. And I got my run in my cargo shorts. I wasn't dressed to run, but sometimes that don't matter. We always joke about a young lady we had, and she came to a track practice one day, and we said, why are you wearing blue jeans? She said, I'm not going to run today. And we kind of guilted her. It was a time mile day, and she got a PR in blue jeans. There are no excuses.
Yeah.
I mean, there are legitimate reasons sometimes, but when it comes to excuses, there are no excuses for not getting your training in.
Yeah. He makes the comment that he wants to be the best animal he can be, which I think is an interesting way to look at himself. He takes responsibility for not only for himself, but for those around him and the environment and everything else very, very seriously.
Yeah.
And you can tell that he feels like, God's given him something, and he needs to always be nurturing that. Mm-hmm. And that's what he means by be the best animal is every opportunity. He talks about, doing burpees in between doing something else. And I just think that's fascinating to be able to do that, to have the energy, I guess, to do that. I mean, sometimes you just want to sit. Sometimes you just want to.
Yeah, and I don't know why this vision popped in my head. He didn't say he does this, but I'm just imagining this guy running into town with a backpack on, 15 miles to go to the bank. He's in the bank, and the teller says, Mr. Karnazes, it'll be just a few minutes before your transaction's done. And I could just see him jumping down the floor and start doing burpees in the bank. I mean, but that's the level of commitment that he has to do what it takes whenever he's got time, because his time, a lot of times, the 50-50-50, so much of his time was filled up with interviews and press and doing, I mean, it was being shown on Regis and Kelly or whatever the show is. So there's so much outside the sport. Runners, we're not like, the top echelon of runners and triathletes and people in the endurance world. People think they have this entourage with them. I'll never forget, I met the world champion female Ironman, Miranda Carfrae. She came into town, and she was in town for the Chattanooga Ironman, and she's the world champion. And I was so excited to get to meet her, and our triathlon team was going to be meeting her. And I'll never forget, she called me the day before and said, hey, Mitchell, there's something wrong with my bike. Do you know a bike mechanic? And I remember thinking, this is the world champion. I assumed that she came to town with an agent, with a mechanic, and with 2 or 3 other people, because she's the world champion. But we don't have that luxury. This sport doesn't necessarily have that luxury. So you can't really farm this out to other people to do. They're not only the world champion. Dean is not only the greatest ultra runner potentially of all time, but there's so much else that's going on in their lives that we don't see. And that's why it's so impressive. Yeah. Some of these things that he's done is because that's only a part of his day.
Yeah. And you asked him about mental toughness and mental toughness. He talked about that being just as important. And for an ultramarathoner, gosh, mental toughness is just about everything, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, the mental side of just that grind. And the mental side of continuing to be the best animal he can be, as he puts it, has got to be daunting sometimes, just to try to keep that up.
Yeah, it was once told to me that if you can run a marathon, you can run 100 miles, so long as you think you can.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. Whether we talk about it, is it Henry Ford? Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're probably right.
Yep.
That go back up to Matt Fitzgerald's book. Go get that book. What is the name of his book?
How Bad Do You Want It?
How Bad Do You Want It? That's a great book. While we're talking about books, that's an incredible read where it talks about the mental side of endurance sports in general, not just endurance sports, the mental side of sport.
Yeah.
And he comes at it from so many different angles and how important it is.
Yeah, it's great. You asked him 3 things that just he would just offer as advice to the average runner, and he came up with those three things. And the first one he said was live in the moment, especially when things are difficult. And we find that so hard to do, don't we? Mm-hmm. My goodness.
We don't want to be there a lot of times.
Yeah.
When it's hard and it's tough, and our mind starts going to all the other things we could be doing, or the reasons we need to stop. And basically he's saying embrace that.
Yeah.
You use that and learn from it.
And as Christians, living in the moment is so important, because there are times where God is talking to us and he's trying to prod us to do things in the moment, and we're missing it because we're worried about the next thing,
right.
Or we're worried about, I can't let this lapse, or whatever the excuse is that we can't be in the moment because we're thinking about something else that has to be done or another part of the schedule.
Right.
I think living in the moment is something that we all struggle with from time to time.
Yeah, for sure. I do.
Yeah.
We're always thinking about that next thing. I'm fascinated. And it's funny that I'm saying I've seen pictures of this before, or I've seen pictures of how this takes place, but some grand thing will happen either in nature or in sport or something, and people didn't get, even though they're there, they don't get to witness it in person, because what have they got up?
Yeah.
They're holding their phones up, and you'll hear them say, I've heard them say before,
Yeah.
I missed it. Got it on film.
Yeah.
But you can go Google it anywhere and find it on film. But so many times we're not there. Sometimes we just need to put our phones down and enjoy what's right in front of us, whether that's our spouse or whether that's nature or whether that's what God's trying to show to us. So many times these computer screens, we've got them right in front of us right now, and so many times we just need to be more like Dean and just get rid of all of it, and enjoy the process.
Unplug occasionally.
Yeah.
Yeah. He I love the phrase he used, misery loves cutlery.
I've never heard that.
I never have heard that either. But he talks about how sometimes, when you're just not feeling well, you just need to eat something. And he talked about, obviously you want to eat things that are good for you.
Yeah. That's not typically what I eat, though. And
no.
It's misery. It's ice cream and whatever.
Nutter butter. Yeah.
Reese's peanut butter cups is mine.
Yeah. Something like that. But I thought that was an interesting comment.
But that's number 2 on his list.
Number 2 on his list.
That's very interesting.
So, yeah. Well, I mean,
which when you run as many miles as he does, he's constantly thinking about food.
He has to be.
Yeah.
He has to get in a ton of calories.
Exactly.
My goodness. And then he said, of course, shoes, and we all know that shoes are incredibly important, and from a practical standpoint, shoes are critically. It's like to me, for running, shoes are sort of like our Bible. It's the foundation of what we do. And if we don't base what we do on the Bible, we are not going to be successful Christians. If we don't have a good pair of running shoes, we're not going to be successful runners. They're kind of similar, aren't they?
I have a question for you to ask him Thursday night. How many pairs of shoes does he go through in a year?
That would be interesting, yeah.
It's got to be a lot.
It does.
It's probably how many pairs of shoes do you go through in a month is probably the more appropriate question. If you think about that, ask him that. I'd love to know that.
Yeah, we need to know that. Need to know that question. So he talked about how you were such a good host. That was nice of him to compliment you, but it also shows how gracious Dean is, and just the idea that he would even do this and then compliment you on what you were doing, I thought was great. Again, we talked about this at the beginning of all of this, that he's such a great ambassador to the sport, but he's more than just an ambassador to the running community. I think he inspires people just to be active.
Yeah.
Because I think I've heard him of course we're talking about running specifically with him because that's what he does mostly, but I think he's more of an advocate for just be the best animal you can be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's great. And we we all have platforms. One of the things that we've talked about on this podcast before is that we all have a platform, and they're all in different places. We have this one we're using right now, but everybody out there has a different platform and a different place for their voice to be heard. And our platform's not as big as Dean's is.
Right.
He's got a bigger platform than us. That's great. And it's great that he would share that with us.
Go ahead.
Sometimes those platforms are just small. Sometimes it's a group of 5 people, but that 5 people are important.
Yeah. And I was kind of going down the road of, his story. Yes, we love to hear about the feats and the big things that Dean has done, but the reason we interview Dean is because he has a story. And sure, Dean has done some incredible things, but his story doesn't resonate with some people. But the key is we all have a story that resonates with someone.
That's right.
And I see that already in this run club. I kind of reached out to a lady the other day and said, you may need to be a guest host, because her story I can tell it will resonate with so many people. So many people will be inspired with her story, a seemingly uninteresting story probably to her, but I see it through a different lens, and I say, so many people will relate to your story when they don't relate to Dean Karnazes' story.
Yeah.
And they may be inspired more by this person than this person. So that's why we continue to beat the drum of cultivate your story. Figure out what your story is, what your testimony is, how you came to know Christ, how you came to know running, and culminate your story or your testimony and share that with people. Yeah. And we have a platform here on Run Club where you can do that. The floor is open on the Run Club forum, and it's very active, and you could reach people on that forum, and we want you to do that. Like I said, the floor is open, and it's welcome for anybody to share. And
once again, you can share your story directly through the devotions tab on runforgod.com.
And we'll be your mouthpiece.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, and another way you can do that is by becoming an instructor. We talked about that. And you can, for a lot of people, we know a lot of instructors who, that's who they've become. They've become the running person in their community who shares Christ. And there's a lot of folks out there right now that could be that person if they chose to. Right. And maybe you're one of those people. And if you are, use the platform that God gives you. We hope that you have enjoyed all that Dean has shared with you. We hope that you've enjoyed the interview. We hope you're enjoying everything that we're doing through Run Club. We certainly want to improve and get better at what we're doing. If you have ideas, certainly let us know what those are. There's different ways to get in touch with us. Get in touch with us. Let us know. In the meantime, share Run Club with others. Let them know about Run Club and let them know how much of an inspiration it is to you. Yeah. Because when people hear your story and about how it inspires you, that will get others on board. And the bigger our group, I think, the more exciting it'll be. So go out there and share Run Club with others. So with that, we'll tie this thing up with Dean, and we'll be looking for the next great person to interview on, and we'll have something coming up, hopefully, before too long. So now just go out there and shine your light.
Good word, Dean.
For more information about the Run for God ministry, go to runforgod.com. If you have questions about your salvation, click on the Peace with God tab. There's nothing more important. Thanks for joining us today.